Jesus, you are the fountain of my life. In you, I have found a resting place. Jesus, you are the fountain of my life. In you, oh God, I have found my resting place. The fountain that never runs dry. It's you, Lord. The fountain that holds my life. It's you, Lord. Chemi isiyo nyauka. Chemi isiyo nyauka. Ni wewe. Chemi ya uhai, kwako niko salama. Maji ya uzima, nawe sina hofu. Chemi ya uhai, niko salama. Maji ya uzima, nawe sina kiu kamwe. Chemi ya uhai, kwako niko salama. Maji ya uzima, ni wewe. Nawe sina hofu, sina kiu. Chemi ya uhai, salama. Maji ya uzima, nawe sina kiu kamwe. I will not run to any other God. 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 Chemi ya uhai, kwako niko salama. Maji ya uzima, nawe sina hofu kamwe. Chemi ya uhai, kwako niko salama. Maji ya uzima, nawe sina kiu kamwe. Jesus, you are the fountain of my life. In you, I have found a resting place. Jesus, you are the fountain of my life. In you, I have found a resting place. Jesus, you are the fountain of my life. In you, I have found a resting place. Jesus, you are the fountain of my life. In you, oh God, I have found my resting place. The fountain that never runs dry. It's you, hand that holds my life. It's you, Lord. Chemi isiyonyauka. Chemi isiyonyauka. Chemi ya uhai, kwako niko salama. Maji ya uzima, nawe sina hofu kamwe. Chemi ya uhai, kwako niko salama. Maji ya uzima, nawe sina kiu kamwe. Chemi ya uhai, kwako niko salama. Maji ya uzima, ni wewe. Nawe sina hofu, sina kiu. Chemi ya uhai, kwako niko salama. Maji ya uzima, nawe sina kiu kamwe. I will not run to any other God. 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 Chemi ya uhai, kwako niko salama. Maji ya uzima, nawe sina hofu kamwe. Chemi ya uhai, kwako niko salama. Maji ya uzima, nawe sina kiu kamwe. Jesus, you are the fountain of my life. In you I have found a resting place. Jesus, you are the
Bible study, wherever you are joining us from, on social media, karibu sana. It's always a pleasure. We are doing a verse by verse study of the book of Ecclesiastes, and we've gone all the way to verse 10. Chapter 10, and we are starting with verse 6 today. Remember, this chapter is more or less some, if I may call them, statements. This chapter reads like the book of Proverbs because it contains some truths of scripture which are stated in sometimes just one statement, and you realize every verse is more or less independent of the other. So from verse 1 he began to talk about how just some foolishness, some slight mistake can be the undoing of many years of a good reputation. We saw the heart of the wise inclines to the right, meaning whenever the Bible talks about the right hand and left hand, it is talking about strength. So when it says it inclines to the right, it's not talking about the left or right, physically. As in, he's not saying someone's heart is on this side. He's talking about strength. And we saw when the anger of a ruler in verse 4 rises against you, You need to stay put. You need not to excavate the matter more. You need to wait until matters cool down. That is the essence of verse 4, that when a leader, when a ruler has a problem with you, you do not make the matter worse. You just stay put until the matter is resolved. And I'm just highlighting some of the things in this chapter. Now, in verse 6, he says, let's go to verse 6 where we start today. Folly is set in great dignity, while the rich sit in a lowly place. What that statement is saying is, in simple terms, that sometimes when you look at those who are in places of leadership, what he's calling in great dignity, they are not necessarily the wise. And this should be somewhat an humbling statement, that those who are in high places, in leadership, in society, etc., they are not necessarily the wise. That's why he's saying folly, as in the foolish may be the ones who are in authority. Let me say this. We have, even from history, some very humorous stories sometimes of people who seemed a bit foolish, for lack of a better word, people who should not have been in leadership, but they unfortunately rose to high places in leadership, both in politics, even in the church, in society. I mean, because there are many ways and many avenues of going to the top, it is possible for the foolish to rise to the very top when it comes even to leadership, for instance, in politics. We have heard some people holding positions of power, and everyone was like, how did they even come to that place? How could they be in positions of leadership? Because of how they behaved. But the truth of the matter is this: because leadership, because power, because when you talk about, for instance, positions of power, they may be the characteristics or the qualifications do not necessarily include wisdom. So it is possible for those who are not very wise to rise to positions of great dignity, while on the other hand, people who are better, in this case, who are rich, maybe in terms of wealth, rich in terms of even wisdom and things like that, they may be in lowly places. And this is the paradox of this life, that sometimes those who are in places of dignity are not necessarily the rich or the wise. Sometimes you may realize the rich are being ruled by people who are not very rich. The wise are being ruled by people who are not very wise. And that is why Solomon made that observation. And we don't need to go far. I mean, look at parliaments, not only in Kenya, all over. You listen to the guys there and you are like, how did that person get to be our leader? How did they get to be the one seated in places of dignity? Because listening to them, interacting with them, they lack dignity. But then, that is why he's saying, remember in verse 5, he had talked about the evil he had seen. These are some of the evils he had seen. This actually, he calls it an error. When now, the one who is in a place of leadership is a fool, but then he is leading people who should be, or rather it should be the other way around. But then, that's why he's calling it an evil under the sun. Another of those evils is found in verse 7. He says, I have seen servants on horses, while princes walk on the ground like servants. To get the right context, remember, we are talking of a time in history where the horse was the means of transport for the high in the society. So if you found someone riding not on a donkey, not on a camel, but on a horse, then it means this person has the means. They were rich, they were considered to be the means of transport for the rich. But remember, the context is, this paragraph starts in verse 5. There is an evil that I have seen under the sun. There is something he's calling an error. One of them is when fools are in leadership. Another one is when you find it's like there is an inversion. Those who are supposed to be princes are the ones walking. Those who are supposed to be servants, meaning they should be the ones walking, they are the one riding. Of course, if you now begin to interrogate, how did that come? How did the servant either trick the prince to be the one walking, or how did the prince lose his position? That is why he's calling it an evil, he's calling it an error. How he lost it may be legitimate, or rather how this came to be. Maybe the servant became rich and bought his former boss, which may be a legitimate way, or he tricked him and now came to rule. Of course, we have seen it. People were employed, they, through corruption and the other means, they take over the empire, and the former owner becomes a poor man. Whether that the process of getting the riches was legitimate or illegitimate, at the end of the day, whenever you see it, where now the one who is supposed to be a servant is the ruler, the one who is supposed to be the ruler is a servant, whenever you find it, it is an error. It is an evil. And that is why now Solomon started by highlighting, this is an error, this is an evil I have seen. And of course, I know when we begin to apply it in a spiritual sense, we begin to bring in the connotation of the children of God are supposed to be princes, the people of this world are supposed to be servants. Well, wherever, how you want to interpret it, or rather to apply it, that is neither here nor there. But the key thing is to realize Solomon recognizes this is an error. In other words, or in a very simple way, whenever things are inverted, whenever things are coming out the opposite of how it should be, then that is why he's calling it an evil, he's calling it an error. You can apply that to anything in your life. Where you feel I am supposed to be here, and yet I am here, of course, even deep within you, you'll be feeling this is not good, this is an error, this is an evil. Either I'm facing some satanic attack or whatever it is, but it is not good. And Solomon observed that, and it is something we can very easily identify with. Verse 8, he goes on to one of now those statements that we are talking about. Actually, now this is a paragraph of another two verses, because you realize the next two verses are somehow related. He says, he who digs a pit will fall into it, and whoever breaks through a wall will be beaten by a serpent. Now, before we go to the application, I want you to look at because every true interpretation of the Bible must begin by the basic. What exactly did the writer mean before we come to the interpretation, application, and all that? When you look at what he was speaking about, basically, he was bringing out the fact that when you are involved in this task of digging a pit, one of the dangers you yourself will stand in is you may fall into that pit. Before you bring in the application, just try to understand it from that point, because there is also that meaning that you will be endangered by whatever you are doing. Before, I'm saying this because sometimes we read this and we jump into the application of, oh, you were digging the pit for someone else and therefore you are fallen into it. That is true when you now come to the interpretation, but I need you to see, or rather application. In the original analysis, he is speaking about if your work is digging a pit, this is now what you may call, and you'll see that, let me show you. Look at verse 9 before I come back to this, because you need to look at both of them. Give me verse 9. He who quarries stones may be hurt by them, and he who splits wood may be endangered by it. Now, I want you to look at those four things. There is the digging of a pit, breaking of a wall, working with the stones, digging out stones in a quarry, and splitting wood. All these, more or less, are career paths. There are people who their work is digging pits, whether you are talking of, in our case, pit latrines or anything, building, foundations. That is their work. There are people who are in the business of breaking down edges. I want to look at it from the plain interpretation before we come to the interpretation and application. There are those whose work is to get the stones we build. And even right here in Kenya, especially now during the rain season, you still get news that there are people who were trapped. They were mining, they were digging sand, or they were quarrying stones, and the ground caved in. That is exactly what he's talking about. Those who split wood, or like now, in our context, those who work in the forest with power source. I know you know one or two people who have gotten accidents in that line of work. I'm raising this because when we jump to our selective application, we miss out on some very good truth that I want to highlight today, which is this. Every career, whatever you are doing, you need to understand the dangers associated with that. As in, if you are working, if you are splitting wood, then you need to understand, I am more likely to be injured by that than someone else who is not in that line of business. If I'm working in a stone quarry, I am more likely. This is danger. There is a word I'm trying to... There's a word used for danger associated with whatever you do. What's the name of that? What's that word? Sorry? Yeah, that's the word. Occupational hazard. This is something that before you jump into the application, this is something everyone should be aware. And this is why sometimes when you see people complaining, especially from their line of work, it really begins to paint someone who doesn't, either they do not understand their line of work or they are plain ignorant. For instance, if you are, just these things, if you are working in a quarry, you know the dangers that are there. So, getting injured by a splint of a rock should not be something that now you are, in our day, you want to keep on posting, vile umegongwa na mawe. That is normal for you. If it was someone who was hiking and they get injured by a stone and they are posting now their injuries from a stone because they were hitchhiking, or rather you were hiking on the mountains, that would be understandable, but not someone who works there. I mean, you need to understand your line of work and the dangers that are there. And even before we leave that aspect, that is why it is also a part of God's wisdom for you to employ whatever now in your field are called now safety measures. Don't be plain stupid and begin to say, oh, God is taking care of me. There is a reason why even when governments begin to regulate certain sectors, there is a reason why engineers wear helmets. It's not because they laugh or they look beautiful in helmets. No, it's because they know I am in a construction zone, things can fall anytime, and my head may get hit. So the least I can do is at least to protect my head so that if I get hit, then I stand a chance. They have protective clothing. Those who work in the fire department, they don't rush to put out a fire using their street clothes. They have protective clothing. I mean, before you jump into the application of, unachimbia wengine kisima, where dia utaingia, this is plainly informing you, you need to be aware of the danger of your line of work, period. Of course, now when it comes to the application, now that's where you can bring up the issues of if, for instance, you were digging that pit with the intention of catching someone else, you may end up being caught by your own trap. So that is okay in that interpretation. When it comes to breaking the wall, yes, if you are the one who is breaking walls as part of your job, of course, that will mean whatever is behind the wall can attack you. I know in the application you begin to talk about a wall being a protective thing, a wall speaking of security. We cannot differ when it comes to application of scriptures. That can apply. That is okay. Yes, when you break the protection, if that wall were to stand for protection, yes, you'll be beaten by whatever is behind the wall. You will have opened the door for whatever is on the other side to attack you, to bite you, and all that, which is still okay. But the first thing I want you to see is this was supposed to make you understand that occupational hazards are real. That is why he is highlighting them, so that you be aware. That means you'll not keep complaining about it. You be prepared for that. Now that I am splitting wood, then I should be prepared that this wood, I am in danger in this particular aspect. And that should not be taken for granted by anyone. Now, verse 10, he goes on to give some other wisdom. He says, if the axe is dull and one does not sharpen the edge, then he must use more strength. But wisdom brings success. Remember what we have just talked about, understanding your career, and if you are wise, you will know what you need to do. He brings in another aspect, the tools you are using. In this case, you are cutting wood. If you do not sharpen the implement that you are using, logic tells you you'll be forced to use more strength. You cannot have it either way. So, either you use your wisdom and use strength and time to sharpen the tool, then use less strength and less time to cut down the tree, or you ignore the sharpening and put all your strength and more time in bringing down the tree. The wisdom that Solomon is bringing out in one statement should apply in every aspect of your life in a very simple way. If you want to succeed, let me use the word used there. If you are wise enough to realize I need success at the shortest time possible, then wisdom demands you must sharpen yourself. Otherwise, you will use more force. To do something very little, you'll be forced to use more force. I believe This is not biblical language, but you have heard of this statement, don't work harder, work smarter. It is more or less the same wisdom in a non-biblical language, but it is still talking about the same thing, as in you can still achieve the same goal in less time using less force if you are wise enough to employ better tools. In this case, to sharpen the implement that you are using. The folly of this world is sometimes we begin to argue it is too expensive to sharpen this tool because, of course, in this case, you just need to go back to the book of Kings, a story. Sometimes, and this is one of the, I don't know what to call it. As we read the Bible, I think sometimes we are just, we are not keen enough to notice some things. Do you remember when the Bible mentions in the days of King Saul, if you like, the catalog for sharpening implements, and it talks about by the time the Israelites went to war, all their implements of war were on the other side of the Philistines. Why? They were being sharpened. There was no one who could sharpen implements on the side of the Israelites. And then you are given the prices. I mean, you may have read that portion and it escaped your mind, but now look at this verse by Solomon in a different book and look at it this way. Part of the reason why someone will, not reason, part of the excuse why someone will not want to take their implement for sharpening, you just need to go back to that verse and realize it is going to cost you money. In the book of Kings, is it Kings or Samuel actually, even the price is given of what it would cost you to sharpen, meaning it is going to cost you. Then, in the same reference under Samuel rather, you realize for you to take the implement to that side of the Philistines, that means you are taking it across the border, at least for them. And even if you say, by the time Solomon was reigning, there were guys around who were doing that, it will still cost you some time, it will cost you money, and that is the excuse sometimes people give. I don't have time to sharpen this. I don't have the money to sharpen this. So I will use more energy and, of course, more time. What sometimes people think is cheap ends up being expensive. Of course, for the street person, and by street person I mean when now you are not using your God-given wisdom, you only think of expense in terms of money. But sometimes you may be paying a high price in terms of strength in your physical body, or even the time it takes. For instance, if I were to go from one point to another, and then there is an alternative to walk the whole day, for 12 hours, and, I will not use my money. That is how I will argue. Or I can use available means of transport. I can board a vehicle or even a plane or whatever means and pay money. Sometimes people only look at it from the aspect of the vehicle is going to cost me money. But then you look at it this way, maybe the vehicle will arrive in 30 minutes, 1 hour. You have walked 12 hours. And for your information, and this is why sometimes, like we say, hiyo mahesabu unakuta hii kuingiana, as you walked, you got hungry and you decided to eat. So even the money supposedly you were saving, it ends up in your stomach. So you arrive on the other side late, tired, and still without money. This is the wisdom he is talking about. Cost should not be an excuse. This person can argue, I don't have money to sharpen the axe. I do not have time. But then he has time to of course, as you are cutting the tree and the axe is dull, you'll use more time. The same time you should have maybe used some of it to carry the implement to the guys who are sharpening. At the end of the day, that's why he concludes by saying, wisdom brings success. And this is one of the things, especially as a believer, you should be always praying for. That you don't look at cost, in this case, only in terms of money. It may be less costly if you use some money and then use less time and less energy to achieve something. Praise the name of the Lord. And this is one of the things sometimes, now when we begin to talk about in other quarters, a poverty mentality, this is actually one of the things that you will have to deal with, because the mind will play tricks and show you you don't have money to sharpen something. But then you'll end up using more time and a lot of strength. And sometimes in the long run, you'll end up using more money, because we are only looking at it from now. But when you look at the bigger picture, you realize actually you saved yourself time, energy, and even money. Ni vile tu sometimes mtu anajidanganya, it's only the money. But anyway, wisdom, my translation here says, wisdom is a benefit to succeed. It's one of the benefits to make you succeed. Verse 11. Another thing to apply wisdom. A serpent may bite when it is not charmed. The babbler is no different. I think the fashion that we are more used to, if the serpent bites before it is charmed, there is no use for the charmer. When you talk about the charmer here, you have seen these guys, especially from Asia and Northern Africa, who they said they can tame snakes. I mean, you see them playing a flute and a cobra is just dancing and it looks mesmerized. Well, scientifically speaking, they are saying actually a snake is deaf, so it can't hear whatever that guy is playing. So from a scientific perspective, it's not like that guy is singing to a snake. Snakes don't hear, they are deaf to sound. They only hear. From a scientific perspective, they hear through whatever, vibration sensors in the body. Now that is science. But that aside, you can see the argument of Solomon. What is the use of a cure if it is coming too late? The snake has already bitten. What is the use now of someone coming in and beginning to tell you how he is the one who tames snakes? He is the one who knows how to make sure snakes do not bite people. I mean, he is arriving too late. He is the right person, but then the timing is wrong. What that is bringing out, in a very simple way, snakes aside, is this. If there is any intervention, then you need it before the disaster strikes. There is no need to now come up with solutions even to your own problems when already the problem has hit. And this is where sometimes, especially in quotes, intercessors come out as this charmer. They will keep on saying, nilikuwa nimeonyeshwa. And you are like, so what exactly is your use to us? If you couldn't stop this, if you are saying you saw, that means you had the time, you had the capacity, or you had the chance to stop it, but you didn't. If the charmer did not stop the snake before it bites, then he becomes useless. That is the argument of Solomon. All interventions, all these solutions that now you are talking about, whether it's in your life or in the lives of others, they could have been handy if they had been failed before disaster struck. Otherwise, it is of no use if now you come up with a vaccine when everyone is dead. That vaccine should have come before the people died. Or rather, even when we talk about other interventions, whether medical or otherwise, the intervention should come before the disaster. That is part of the wisdom that he is talking about. And by the way, like I said, this whole chapter, every statement carries a lot of wisdom that if you apply, like in this case, you will begin to realize if really I boast of being able to charm snakes, then I am useful before the snake bites. Otherwise, if I now show up later, then what is my use? That's why this translation says the babbler is no different. The babbler here is the one who is trying to purport to charm the snake. Let's go to verse 12. I mean, these statements are a little bit straightforward. I hope you can get the wisdom that is in them. Verse 12. The next verse now. The words of a wise man's mouth win him favor, but the lips of a fool consume him. Once again, I think we had seen something close to that. Not exactly that, but close to that. The words that come from one's mouth can either bring something pleasant or, like he calls now the opposite of that, the fool, his mouth will consume him. Of course, he's playing with words. Your mouth consuming you, just playing with those words. But at the end of it, you begin to see what comes out of your mouth, the speech that comes out of your mouth, the words of your mouth can either be the one thing that saves you or you are undoing. There are many other proverbs and many other wise sayings, both in the Bible and out of the Bible, that try to teach us that if we can take care of what we say, we are going off. Some of the trouble we find ourselves in can easily be dealt with. I mean, I remember seeing a book. I am yet to read it, but the title is Me and My Big Mouth. And we know what that statement means. That sometimes, if you had kept your mouth shut, you would be in less trouble. You would avoid some of the problems that sometimes come to swallow people. And do you realize many of the problems in this life, they start from a word. Either when you talk about people being swindled of their money, it started with a conversation. Someone engaged you and you decided to answer. I'm selling this. You decided to engage. If you had kept quiet, you would never have been conned, because the other party cannot con someone who is not speaking. Talk of words you say that later turned out against you. You are now being accused of spreading a lie or things like that. If you had kept quiet, even with that knowledge, you wouldn't be swallowed up later. And that's why he's saying here, the words of a wise man's mouth are gracious. They will save him. They will bring grace. But the lips of a fool, they will swallow him. I mean, whatever he says will turn against them. That's why even in a legal perspective, you hear them say, whatever you say shall and will be used against you in a court of law. Why? The words you begin to say, I was there, I saw this and this. Those words can now become the very words that are going to swallow you up. I mean, do you remember, anyway, this is in the public domain, when the former governor of Nyeri died? Was it the governor? Some other county officials, when they arrived there, briefing the press, they made some very reckless statements, and now it is ceased from being an accident and became an investigation. It was a simple accident, before these guys came and opened their mouth. I don't know, I think it is still somewhere, that inquest file is still going on. But if those guys kept quiet, really, this was an accident. Even if they knew something, because they were speaking supposedly because they knew some information, if they had kept quiet, those words would never have come to haunt them. But because they opened their mouth foolishly, now those words begin to swallow them. The wisdom that Solomon is talking about is something that anyone who has ever gotten into trouble because of something they said, let me add foolishly, you know the truth of this statement. That you may have uttered a word that you come to regret. I wish I had kept quiet. Whether the word was right, whether it was wrong, whether the information was accurate, but then you realize if I had kept quiet, even if the information was accurate, then no one would have followed me. That is the wisdom. And that's why even in the New Testament, it begins to talk about listening more, or the word used is be quick to hear, but slow to speak. And someone, not in the Bible now, using this wisdom and others, say this, that the reason why God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth was so that for every one word I speak, I have listened to 2 other words. In other words, I should hear double what I am speaking. But then, like someone jokingly said, many people look like they have 2 mouths and 1 ear. They speak more than they even hear, and they end up getting into trouble. They are losing friends because of their big mouth. They are getting even into legal problems because of their mouth. They are getting into serious trouble everywhere because of their mouth. If they had kept quiet, they would have, if the words of their mouths were gracious, meaning, for one, they are less, you speak fewer words, and then even when you have to speak, then it is something that is gracious. Then it is not going to land you into trouble. I hope that is clear. Now, actually, verse 13 is a continuation of the same, this aspect of the mouth. Why does the words of the foolish consume him? He says, the beginning of the words of his mouth is foolishness, and the end of his talk is evil madness. Now that is the foolish one, the one whose speech consumes him. The beginning, as he begins to speak, it is out of foolishness, meaning he is not thinking about what he is about to say. He has not considered the implication of what he is about to say. And then that's how it begins. But the end, look at what the end will be. It is evil madness, or like this translation, raving madness. Let's talk about incitement. It starts out as a casual, foolish statement. But then, that statement begins, like it says, the end of that will be evil madness. Sometimes people say things, and then other people take those words, and the thing becomes now, or rather goes out of hand. Even the one who originally spoke is now unable to contain it. If I remember well, when we were learning about how the Second World War started, it was just one word from a guy. Was it in Bosnia or someplace? I don't remember, but it was in one of those European countries. There was a shooting. You can Google this for more information. There was a shooting somewhere. Then someone made a statement. That statement, like he's saying, started as a foolish statement, but it gained momentum, And by the end of that war, millions of people had died. The geography and the boundaries as we knew them were changed. Lives were transformed forever. And some of the movements you see up to this day, like the United Nations and many other interventions, were born, that kind of madness were born because someone began with a foolish statement which ended up not the way maybe he had expected. Closer home, we know of Rwanda. Right here in our own country, we know of 2008. It starts as a statement that may look like you cannot tell me people are killing each other because one person said this. But that is exactly what Solomon is saying. The beginning of, or rather the words of his mouth begin with foolishness, but the end will be raving madness. Another translation says, calls it evil madness. Because words have the ability to change lives. Your own life, the life of those around you. And that's why sometimes actually people who are not careful with how they talk, they have a problem with the relationships. And they keep on blaming other people. Yet they don't understand, maybe if you had been a little bit wise in how you speak, maybe you would have more friends. But then, like we say, your mouth is a loose cannon. It is firing in any direction, endangering people. And no one wants to be around someone who can say something anytime, anyhow, and you find yourself either embarrassed or even wounded because of their foolishness. That is why Solomon is warning against that. Now, another thing about this talking and the fool, he continues to say in verse 14, a fool also, I want you to listen, he's raising several issues. One is talking about how it started. Now he brings in another aspect. A fool also multiplies words. In Proverbs it says, in the multitude of words, sin is not lacking. He continues to say, no man knows what is to be. Who can tell him what will be after him? This is in the context of a fool has just begun to speak. You don't know what will come next. So like we say, you are there crossing your fingers. He doesn't say something more nastier than what he has already said. So no one knows how it is going to end. And at the end of the day, it's like, who can tell this person to keep quiet? Because already he has multiplied words. Have you realized, just like James says in the New Testament, if all of us were slow to speak, but quick to listen, then just like he's saying, you would say fewer words. But in this case, the fool multiplies his words. The more you speak, of course, this is a question of probability and statistics. Out of 10 words, what is the probability that 1 or 2 words is going to be a foolish word? Then take that and multiply 1,000,000 times. Now the probability goes higher. And as you continue to increase the words, everything now, the statistics begin to change a bit. And that's why now he's saying a fool, in addition to talking carelessly, there is also the aspect of they multiply words. They are the talkative type. Even when they are saying a simple thing, they will choose 1,000,000 words to describe what could have been said in one sentence. And in those 1,000,000 words, you may end up adding a few things here and there. You may end up exaggerating. You may, of course, in the multiplication of words, you will end up now bringing in many other things that may not have been there in the first place. And that's why, in addition to him starting to speak foolishly, he also, the quantity of words, the quality of words is wrong. The quantity of words will also be wrong. And that's why now, even in the New Testament, we are being encouraged to say less, because the chances of you now coming out of grace, like he had said, are fewer if you would speak less. Why do you think Jesus kept quiet in the court when he was arrested? Because he knew the more I begin to defend myself, the more I'll be forced to use many words that may be misinterpreted, and many other things also will come out. That's where now you find wisdom like this. It's not in the Bible, but it is part of what the Bible talks about. Silence can never be misquoted. Of course, when someone begins to say, oh, I was misquoted, it means there is a quote somewhere, right? If there was no quote anywhere, you cannot misquote silence. You may want to misinterpret silence, but you can never misquote silence. Anyway, you can see the wisdom that a fool will multiply words. Let's go on. He goes on to something else. Now, this is in application to how you live this life. Verse 15. Is it? Yes, verse 15. The labor of fools, where is them? For they do not even know how to go to the city. Give me the next verse. Oh, no, that one is a bit different. Now, I want you to look at this and see a number of things. One, this person who is being called a labor, whatever he is doing makes them weary for several reasons. One, he doesn't see the end result. By the way, when we talk about labor, and you classify one form of labor to be weariness, and another labor, like we say, in all labor there is profit, it is the end result that makes whatever you are going through different. I mean, when people work for a whole month, they are still laboring, and you don't hear them saying, I'm weary, unless when they want to quit the job. Nimechoka na hii kazi. Wakati hawakuwa wamechoka, it's not that the job was lighter, but they could see at the end of the month or at the end of the day, I have labored, in return I have this. It is not just financial. There is something else, and I will come to that in a short while. So, this fool, one of the reasons is because he is not looking at what is the end of this labor. He is only looking at it from, it is hard. He is not seeing, I need to do this if I want to get that profit. The other aspect is, he doesn't, of course, if you now go back to the aspect of sharpening, he doesn't use wisdom to use less strength. You remember, if you don't sharpen the implement. So he ends up using more energy. So because of his foolishness, of course he will get tired. The wise person next to him, cutting down the same tree, will not get as tired as him, simply because now he was wise enough to sharpen his implement. Then look at the next statement. They do not even know how to go to the city. Now, that statement, go to the city, has some implications in it. One, that city is what I was calling the profit. That's why now the wise person, the labor is not weary to him, because he knows this labor will take me to the city. Whatever now that city is, you can now substitute that with the profit, the gain, the benefit. But the fool doesn't see that. So even his labor, aimpei pumziko. For instance, let's use the an analogy we keep on using. When we say people, some people know how to thank themselves, that baada ya kufanya kazi, amejipeleka Mombasa ama wherever, ameenda kujishukuru, amerudi akiwa ready to go back to labor. He feels, I went to the city, so at least I feel my labor gave me the ability to go to the city, to go to, to rewind, to relax. The fool does not even know the way to that city. So at the end of the day, literally, he has been toiling in the village, so he's tired. He never got time to rewind. He doesn't even know where that city, where you went to relax, the wise person went to relax. So he becomes more weary. The other meaning is he doesn't know how to maximize on whatever now was the benefit. When we talk about the city, even in our own day, we are talking about the place where you can now get, for instance, even the things you want. I mean, there is a reason why some things are not available in the village. There is a reason why when you need certain things, certain foods, you can only get them in the city. The fool doesn't even know the way to the city. So it becomes frustrating, and that's why now his labor, which could have led him to the city, becomes more even tiresome because he has no break to go to the city. And even when he has a break, he doesn't know where to go. And that is why now his labor becomes more tiresome. I mean, this sounds like simple logic, but this is the difference between those who say, kazi imemchokesha, and those who are saying, I'm looking forward to another season. We take, like here in Kenya, we take what we call a Christmas break. The fool doesn't know the way to the city. So January is even more tired. The wise person takes that break and goes to the city. Of course, to the person in town, the city is a village. You'll go back to a place where now he can relax. No traffic jam, he knows how to rewind. That's why I said whatever that city means is where now you can get time to rewind, to relax, the good things of this life. But the fool who has no clue where it is feels tired because there is no break, there is no resting. And even when he has a chance to rest, he doesn't know where, he doesn't know how, and it becomes more tedious. Apply that now to what the Bible calls, or rather who the Bible calls a fool, and you'll know why it becomes a little bit futile. Have you ever felt a little bit sorry? Especially when you see someone who has labored a whole week, a whole month, and then once they get the pay, they go and they drink that money in one night, and then the next day they are now desperate, trying to get money for food. And you are looking at them and you are like, your labor, because you didn't know the way to the city, a safer place, how to spend that money. What you worked for 30 days is gone in one day. And it's not like you made an investment somewhere where you are saying, yes, salary ya hii mwezi, nilinunua nyumba, ya kukodisha ama something. He drank all of it. So he becomes, he has now to labor more. Now when you look at the fool in the sense of the one who says there is no God. In other words, I don't need to follow anything from God. It becomes tedious. It becomes something, a cycle that you need to break away from because it brings weariness instead of rest. On the other hand, the one who is wise, they are still laboring, but now their labor has profit. After their labor, they know the way to the city. And that means now they they break the cycle, and that is what now Solomon is talking about. I believe it's what? Yeah, it's in the next chapter. You'll see him talking about how now, at the end of it all, there needs to be that balance between I'm laboring and I also know how to take myself to the city. That means now to find a way to get profit out of my labor. That's all the time we have for today. Shall we stand on our feet and pray? Father, in Jesus' name, I pray, may the wisdom that we are learning be part of us in the name of Jesus. May you give us the wisdom in Jesus' name to walk in accordance with your word, that we will not be taken aside, that we will not fall into the trap of the enemy, of laboring without rest, of not sharpening ourselves when it comes to the labor that is before us. May we apply wisdom that we can enjoy the life you have given to us. Thank you for the wisdom you are shedding abroad in our hearts. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. The Lord bless you. See you next Wednesday, same place, same time.